Hello, all you freedom-loving people. Welcome to another episode of Front Page. I'm your host, Scott Cameron Goulet. Twitter's former security chief, Peter Zatko, testified before the Senate Judiciary Committee on Tuesday. He revealed a number of shocking secrets about Twitter. There is a wave of returning conservative forces in the most radical countries of Europe and in our North American neighbor Canada. This is a ray of hope for the people whose lives have become increasingly difficult under leftist governments. Europe has recently introduced regulations that we have not heard of. If this does not change, they are not far from an authoritarian system there. Okay, let's get into it. Twitter's former security chief, Peter Zatko, testified before the Senate Judiciary Committee on Tuesday, revealing a number of insider secrets that the public didn't know about.
I'm here today because Twitter leadership is misleading the public, lawmakers, regulators, and even its own board of directors.
His most serious allegation is that Twitter violated the terms of a 2011 Federal Trade Commission settlement by falsely claiming that it had taken stronger measures to protect the security and privacy of its users, when in fact Twitter compromised platform users, shareholders, and U.S. national security in a wide range of security failures.
The company's cybersecurity failures make it vulnerable to exploitation, causing real harm to real people. And when an influential media platform can be compromised by teenagers, thieves, and spies, and the company repeatedly creates security problems on their own, this is a big deal for all of us.
Zatko testified that what Twitter users did not know was that far more personal information was being disclosed than they were aware of. The basic systemic failures cited by the company's engineers were not resolved. Twitter's leadership chose to ignore Zatko's repeated warnings about basic cybersecurity issues because they put profits ahead of security. According to Zatko, Twitter's data security problems stem from two basic issues.
First, they don't know what data they have, where it lives, or where it came from, and so, unsurprisingly, they can't protect it. And this leads to the second problem, which is the employees then have to have too much access to too much data and to too many systems.
Zatko said that because Twitter does not have the ability to record how employees access user accounts, it's difficult for the company to find out when employees abuse their access rights. For example, about half of the Twitter employees have access to the Twitter account of Senator Chuck Grassley, the committee's top-ranking member. Zatko also complained that Twitter began relying on sales to Chinese entities. This increased the risk that these entities might access the data of Chinese users who had circumvented the communist regime's censorship firewall. And Twitter executives are well aware of the consequences that these Chinese people will face from the Chinese Communist Party. For years, the communist regime has arrested, harassed, and imprisoned citizens who circumvented its firewalls to use and to post information on Twitter. Executives responded to Zatko's concern by saying, "We're already in bed. It would be problematic if we lost that revenue stream, so figure out a way to make people comfortable with it." Earlier this year, the U.S. government told Twitter's former security chief that at least one agent from China's Ministry of State Security, which is the Communist Party's top intelligence agency, was working at the company.
I had been told because the corporate security, physical security team had been contacted and told that there was at least one agent of the MSS, which is one of China's intelligence services, on the payroll inside Twitter.
When Zatko raised his concerns about Twitter's foreign agents with an executive, the executive's response was,
"Well, since we already have one, what does it matter if we have more? Let's keep growing the office."
Zatko also disclosed that Twitter knowingly allowed agents of the Indian government to serve at the company. They had access to users' highly sensitive data.
Twitter would be a goldmine, from my understanding, from people in the community who focus on foreign intelligence organizations and assets. If you placed somebody in Twitter, as I believe that, as we know has happened, it would be very difficult to Twitter to find them.
On September 10th, Pierre Poilievre was elected leader of the Conservative Party of Canada. With a majority of nearly 70% of the vote, the 43-year-old Poilievre won in the first round of voting. This has not happened in Canada since Stephen Harper was elected as the Conservative Party leader on the first ballot, which is more than a decade ago. The past two leadership contests have taken several rounds of voting. Poilievre's election changes the division within the Conservative Party in Canada that have existed for the past several years. Poilievre holds a bachelor's degree in international relations from the University of Calgary. He was first elected to Parliament in 2004 at the age of 25, and he has been re-elected ever since. Poilievre has always been a conservative and talented advocate of freedom and small government governance. When he speaks on Parliament Hill, he is able to expose the Trudeau's government's shortcomings in simple, sharp language. Inside the Conservative Party, many people have been optimistic about him and have urged him to run for the party leadership, but he's always politely refused. Perhaps he feels that the Trudeau government has finally gone too far for Canadians in the COVID-19 pandemic, such as the long blockade, the unnecessary use of the Emergency Act to brutally suppress the peaceful truckers, the printing of more money to cause inflation, the carbon tax in the name of green energy, and the shutdown of the oil pipelines to hurt the economy. Immediately after he announced his candidacy, he received the support of many key figures in the Conservative Party. Former Prime Minister Stephen Harper also made an unprecedented appearance in support of him. So it was not surprising that he was elected as the party leader. Poilievre has a strong conservative and unambiguous stance. He posted a 2-minute video on Twitter that spoke to all hardworking Canadians who don't want their freedoms eroded by the government. He leads people to think about the truth. That is, Trudeau thinks he's your boss, but you're really his boss. Poilievre promised that if he becomes Prime Minister in Canada, he will put people back in control of their lives. He will reduce corporate regulation. He will give people the freedom to raise their children with their own values. He will give people the freedom to make their own decisions about their health and vaccines. He will let people speak without fear, and he will make Canada the freest country in the world. This is the type of bold leadership that every country needs right now.
Canadians are hurting, and it is our job to transform that hurt into hope, and that is my mission.
When Stephen Harper was Prime Minister in Canada, the cost of houses in Canada were 2 times cheaper than they are now. Working families could afford to buy houses, and prices were stable for years. Even the severe financial crisis in the United States in 2008 did not affect Canada that much, and people were not arrested under the Emergency Act for demonstrating and expressing their discontent with the government back then. Many people now hope that Poilievre will become the second Harper, and he will bring back the prosperous and free days of Canada. Preliminary results of Sunday's Swedish parliamentary elections on September 11th show that the right-wing bloc is expected to form a new government by defeating the left-wing bloc led by Prime Minister Magdalena Andersson. As of Monday morning, the 4-party right-wing bloc led by moderates had won 175 seats, while the left-wing bloc of 4 parties supporting Andersson as Prime Minister won 174 seats. This is according to about 95% of the votes already counted. If this result is finally confirmed, it will mean that the right-wing group has gained a parliamentary majority, although only by 1 seat. This paves the way for the group to form a government. However, officials do not expect the vote count to be completed until Wednesday because of the extreme closeness of the votes for each faction. The mail-in ballots and votes from overseas citizens are still to be counted. After that, all the votes will be counted again before the results can be announced. The 8 parties that are vying for the 349 seats in the Swedish Parliament have formed 2 major blocs. The Social Democratic Party, the Environment Party, the Left Party, and the Centre Party form a coalition of left-wing parties. a right-wing party bloc was formed by the Moderate United Party, the Swedish Democrats, the Freedom Party, and the Christian Democrats. The Social Democrats received 30.5% of the vote this time, consolidating their position as the #1 party. However, the far-right Swedish Democrats made significant progress, gaining 20% of the vote and becoming the second largest party. Sweden is one of the most radical countries in Europe, and for the first time in nearly a decade, the right-wing camp won a majority of seats in the parliamentary elections. World leaders have been issuing congratulatory messages to Liz Truss since she took office. But because of her tough stance on the Chinese Communist Party, the CCP, the top Chinese leader, Xi Jinping, has not yet sent her a congratulatory message. Communist Party officials have been unusually low-key about Truss's appointment. They claim to have handled the congratulations in accordance with diplomatic practice. It was only on the evening of September 7th that Xinhua, the official Communist Party media, reported that Premier Li Keqiang had called Truss a few days ago in order to congratulate her on her appointment as Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. In contrast, Xi Jinping has made high-profile congratulations when South Korea and Japan elected their presidents or prime ministers. Some analysts believe that the CCP's choice to congratulate Truss on her election in a low profile may be related to her hardline style against the CCP. The third female prime minister in British history is known for her tough talk. Truss is known as the Iron Lady by some media because of her sharp words and for her strong attitude, like Margaret Thatcher, who was Britain's first female prime minister. Truss intends to raise the status of the Communist Party from its current status as a systemic competitor to that of a serious threat on the day she takes office. This puts Beijing on equal footing with Russia. Truss's hardline approach sparked outrage from the CCP, which claimed that it was irresponsible. According to Truss, the CCP poses a threat to the post-World War II rule-based international order. It is her job to build a defense against that threat. Truss's attitude means the end of the golden age between Britain and China that was envisioned by the former Prime Minister David Cameron. In October 2015, Xi Jinping visited Britain, spending 3 days in London and attending more than 20 political events. In a report at the time, Xinhua said that Xi's visit ushered in a golden era for the development of Sino-British relations. On October 21, 2015 alone, China and Britain signed 28 business agreements that were worth nearly $61.8 billion. Sino-British relations have also been defined by both sides as moving toward a golden decade. The official Chinese media has described the UK as the best partner in the West. However, over the past 7 years, with 3 changes of prime ministers and with the growing criticism of the Communist Party on trade and with China's repression in Hong Kong and Xinjiang, Britain has gone from being one of China's biggest supporters in Europe to one of its fiercest critics. The British government has recently moved to restrict CCP participation in Britain's nuclear power industry. The British government also previously signed a defense agreement to provide Australia with technology to build nuclear submarines in order to help Australia counter the growing influence of the CCP. This year, southern China suffered from rare high temperatures and from drought. The water area of Poyang Lake, which is the largest freshwater lake in China, is only 1/6 the size. Several porpoises, which are the representative species of the Poyang Lake water system, have been found stranded and have died. According to Chinese media on September 6, the water level of Poyang Lake receded to 7.99 meters. This means that Poyang Lake has entered the extremely dry period, which is below 8 meters. This dry period is 115 days earlier than the average dry period. The finless porpoise is the only freshwater mammal in the Yangtze River at present. They live in the middle and along the lower reaches of the Yangtze River's main stream. They also live in the lakes connected with the Yangtze River. There are only about 450 dolphins in the waters of Poyang Lake. This is about 50% of the total of finless porpoises in China. So there are about 900 finless porpoises in China. The finless porpoise has a certain characteristic. The corners of its mouth are slightly upturned, so from an angle, it seems like they're smiling. So the finless porpoise has the title, the Smiling Angel. However, this year's drought has sadly made it impossible for the porpoises to smile. An online video shows a porpoise lying on a lake shore, its eyes closed forever. There is also a puddle of reddish-brown blood that is near its head. The video publisher said that it is the 7th porpoise that has died in the Poyang Lake system this year. Most of them are stranded and close to death. With the energy crisis, some countries in Europe are starting to introduce some unthinkable policies. Swiss lawmakers, for example, are preparing to set legal limits on the use of winter heating. People who heat their homes above a certain temperature during the winter will face fines and possible prison sentences of 3 years. Under the plan, gas-heated buildings would be limited to 66.2 degrees Fahrenheit. And water heating would be limited to 140 degrees Fahrenheit. Saunas and swimming pools will also be forced to stay cooler by the government order. If heating buildings exceeds the legal limit, then the homeowner becomes a heating offender, and they will face fines ranging from $30 to a maximum of $3,000 per day. Fines for companies that deliberately violate the rules can be much higher. The Swiss German-language daily Blick reports that the biggest concern is that individuals found to have deliberately violated energy rationing restrictions could be imprisoned for up to 3 years. Economic Affairs Minister Guy Parmelin tried to downplay the draconian measures. He said last week, "We are not a police state." Marcus Sporndley, who is a spokesman for the Federal Treasury, said that the government would be open to tips from neighbors turning in their fellow citizens if the crime is reported and controlled and it can subsequently be proven. I'm not sure what the Swiss government's definition of a police state is, but it seems to me that a country whose residents don't have the freedom to heat their homes and who have to live under the watchful eye of their neighbors is certainly not what I would call a free country. A Dutch city is moving to ban meat advertising in public places. But why? Dutch lawmakers say that the animals produce methane from burping and farting. The Food and Agricultural Organization of the United Nations attributes more than 14% of greenhouse gas emissions to livestock. So many environmentalists in the Netherlands are proposing to limit or to even eliminate animal agriculture. This has led to a ban on meat advertising. Advertisements for fossil fuels, fossil-fueled powered cars, and holiday flights will also be banned. The resolution was proposed in Haarlem, a city in West Amsterdam. It will come into force in 2024. The Netherlands is a major livestock center, and according to the National Statistics Agency, the CBS, 95% of Dutch adults eat meat, although 75% of adults do not eat meat every day. However, that would change soon if the new rules take effect. As we previously reported in June, the Dutch government enacted its toughest law to date, proposing massive cuts in nitrogen emissions that are large enough to close about 1/3 of the country's farms by 2030. The announcement sparked an outcry from farmers, truckers, and others in the Netherlands and abroad. The Netherlands Agricultural Minister, Henk Stankhouwer, has been forced to resign following the widespread protests from Dutch farmers. He told the Dutch cabinet that pushback from farmers had meant that he would not be able to meet a September deadline for rolling out the government's radical green policy. Clearly, the radical policy is a government action. It's not the decision of a particular minister. A World Economic Forum white paper says that such policies can help countries accelerate their food systems transformation. So what exactly does this transformation look like? They want alternative foods and proteins. In other words, they want soy-based fake beef. They want lab-grown meat substitutes. They want ground-up insects. And they want other food to replace traditional meat. I don't know about anyone else, but I don't think insects should be food for humans. Tom Rusher, press officer for the Populist Democratic Forum Party, he sees this as a part of a larger trend, that is, government deciding what people have to eat. Okay, this is our show for today. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you like what you heard today, please don't forget to like this video and share it with your friends and family, because everybody deserves to know the truth. Again, thank you for watching Front Page, and we will see you next time.